Good morning, everyone. It's 3 minutes after 11. Sorry, got caught up in order of worship and creating the bulletins for this coming Sunday, which is our final One Hope ecumenical worship in Griffin Park. It's going to be a communion day. We're co-hosting, the co-leading between the First United Methodist Church and First Baptist Church. Really kind of neat, I think. But I'm a church nerd. I'm a Bible nerd kind of guy. What we're going to do is we've got the lectionary passage for Sunday. And we're going to read that. And then Pastor Greg from the United Methodist Church is going to preach for 10 minutes. And then I am going to preach for 10 minutes. I think it's neat for the congregation to see how two different pastors, two different people can approach the same passage of Scripture. Now, I don't know what Pastor Greg is preaching on, and he doesn't know what I'm preaching on. So we could have really close sermons. We could be pulling the same themes, or we could be wildly divergent. That's part of the fun, is to kind of see how this plays out. How does two different pastors from two different faith traditions go? How do they approach the same passage of Scripture? So that's this coming Sunday. I'm excited about it. I've been really enjoying our time in Griffin Park, although I'm ready to get back into our sanctuary. So let's get on with today's lectionary readings. We're still in Psalm 18, 1 to 6 and 43 to 50, the beginning and end of one of the long Psalms. And then we're going to go to 1 Chronicles 10, 1 to 14. I know we've been in Samuel, 1 Samuel and then the 2 Samuel. Chronicles covers pretty much the same ground as Samuel. So we're going to hear the same. It is the death of Saul and his sons, but we're going to see it from a different perspective, because there are some differences. Sometimes Chronicles is really closely mirroring Samuel, and then sometimes it's wildly divergent. In this case, it's pretty close. There's small differences. So we're going to kind of bounce over to Chronicles, and then we'll go back to Samuel tomorrow. And then our gospel passage for today, our New Testament passage, I should say, is Mark 9, 14 to 29. So, without further ado, Psalm 18, the Psalm for victory, from David. On the day the Lord delivered him from the hands of his enemies and from the hand of Saul. That's kind of important, the way that that little intro is. It's not postscript, it's not kind of prescript, it's kind of introduction. Anyway, because delivered from the hand of his enemies and from the hand of Saul. So what is that telling us is David did not consider Saul one of his enemies. Saul is kind of pulled out separately. Read into that as you will. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, so I shall be saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of perdition assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. And in my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Let's go for 43. You delivered me from strife with the peoples. You made me head of the nations. People whom I had not known served me. As soon as they heard of me, they obeyed me. Foreigners came cringing to me. Foreigners lost heart and came trembling out of their strongholds. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. The God who gave me vengeance and subdued peoples under me, who delivered me from my enemies. Indeed, you exalted me above my adversaries. You delivered me from the violent. For this I will extol you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing praises to your name. Great triumphs he gives to his king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. Excuse me, I'm a little stuffy today. Now we go to the Chronicles passage. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, sons of Saul. And the battle pressed hard on Saul, and the archers found him, and he was wounded by the archers. And then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, so that these uncircumcised may not come and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer was unwilling, for he was terrified. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died. Thus Saul died, he and his 3 sons, and all his house died together. When all the men of Israel who were in the valley saw that the army had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they stripped him and took his head and his armor and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to their idols and to the people. And they put his armor in the temple of their gods and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. But when all Jabesh Gilead heard that everything the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant warriors got up and took away the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons and brought them to Jabesh. Then they buried their bones under the oak in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So Saul died for his unfaithfulness. He was unfaithful to the Lord in that he did not keep the command of the Lord. Moreover, he had consulted a medium seeking guidance and did not seek guidance from the Lord. Therefore, the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David, son of Jesse. Now, that last bit is different. That was not in the Samuel passage about Saul dying for his unfaithfulness. So that's new. It's unique to Chronicles, I should say. And then there's one little detail that I don't recall from the Chronicles or the Samuel passage, is they put his armor in the temple of their gods and fastened his head in the temple of Dagon. Dagon, you might recall, when the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it in the temple of Dagon, because they'd captured it. Yay, our God is bigger. So they put it in their God's temple. And the next day, when they came in, the statue of Dagon, the idol of Dagon, had fallen face forward. So they set it back up. And the next day, they came in, and not only had it fallen face forward, but now it was all broken. And that was one of the things that made them, that and they all started growing tumors. That was what kind of was prompting them to return the ark to the Israelites. But it was in the temple of Dagon. So that's one of the local gods for the Philistines. And apparently they put his head there. Now it doesn't say about them fastening his body to the wall. So that's different. All right. Let's go to Mark 9:14-29. Now this passage is immediately after the Transfiguration, where Jesus had taken Peter and James and John with him up to the mount. And there he was revealed, the shining light and the white robes, as the Son of God, but also he was conversing with Moses and Elijah. And Peter wanted to build tabernacles, wanted to build shelters for Moses and Elijah and Jesus. So anyway, this is right after they came down. And one of the ones I recorded for this weekend, I mistakenly put that one after the Transfiguration, but no, it's this one. So when they came down, Jesus, James, John, Peter, they came to the disciples and they saw a great crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. And when the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe and they ran forward to greet him. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak. And whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." And he answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw him being Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help him." And Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out, "I believe, help my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Your spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he was able to stand. And when he entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind can only come out through prayer." A couple things here. One is, this is a mute spirit. If you look, where is it? Verse 17. He has a spirit and makes him unable to speak. Now this is kind of important because in the eyes of the Jewish exorcists, it would be almost impossible to cast this demon out because they believed you had to learn a demon's name before you could cast it out. So if the demon made someone mute, you could not learn his name. But Jesus showed that that wasn't a requirement for him. He had, the power of God that he was able to cast out without learning its name. And yes, those of you who might be familiar with the condition or have medical background, it does seem that the boy displays the symptoms of epilepsy. Some of those mental disorder, what we would call a mental disorder or mental illness today, or those kind of conditions, were attributed to demons in ancient Israel. Now, is it simply a different way of looking at them, or are there some of those conditions that are caused by demons? I don't know. The other important point I wanted to talk about this one is the "I believe, help my unbelief." Because it's not that he didn't believe. He obviously believed. He brought the boy to Jesus to be healed. But he had some doubts. So that's why he pleads, "Lord, I do believe. Help my unbelief." You can really only say that if you have faith. There's a quote by Charles Spurgeon, the great evangelist. It says, "While men have no faith, they're unconscious of their unbelief. But as soon as they get a little faith, then they begin to be conscious of the greatness of their unbelief." So you really only recognize your doubts when you have faith. If you don't have any faith, you're not really aware of just the seriousness of your doubts. One other thing on this one, Simone Weil, who was a Jewish philosopher, French-born, died of a illness as the age of 34 back in 1943. And during her final illness, someone said, "I can only pray for you." And Simone answered, "Why do you say only? That's the best thing you can do for me." We shortchanged the power of prayer in our culture in 1943, in 2021, and in AD, 29, 30, whenever this passage was, because they could not cast out that demon because it can only be cast out through prayer, through the power of prayer. And there's one thing I meant to talk about with the psalm, and I forgot, so I'm going to bring it up now. Is you can actually find this all 50 verses of Psalm 18 almost completely identically in 2 Samuel 22, with only some minor changes. The one school of thought by biblical scholars is that 2 Samuel 22 was written first, and then later, with some minor edits, it was placed in the Psalms, in the book of Psalms. So that's one explanation for the why, because it just kind of shows up in 2 Samuel 22. It's really seems almost out of place in that final chapter of 2 Samuel. So, but that's an interesting thing that you'll find it almost word for word in 2 Samuel 22. And that, my friends, is enough for today, I think. So this has been our daily lectionary reading for Wednesday, June 30th, the final day of June. We're to July already. Can you believe that? I don't. It seems like yesterday was Easter when I began my service here, my ministry here at First Baptist. That I feel like I blinked my eyes from Easter to now. So the time has just flown by, and I've enjoyed every second of it. But I feel like I haven't had a chance to really enjoy it because, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting older and time seems to pass faster as we get older. I don't know. But yeah, tomorrow's July 1st. See you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.